Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. If you can't tell from the backdrop, if you're watching the video version of this, my guest is someone who is steeped in the world of comics. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Austin Hough is the person I'm talking with. Austin, did you get your start? Was it action figures and custom
Yeah,
figures in design?
that's actually correct. The characters in the Masters, the villains in particular, were inspired by my favorite artists of the 20th century.
Hmm.
And as a custom action figure creator, I took these ideas and created action figures first.
Love it. I love it.
Now, I have been making custom Mego action figures for the better part of the last 20 years, close to 25.
Hmm.
And when I came up with these ideas and created the action figures, you have to remember when you create something, the first thing you do is you go and you share it on social media with all your friends,
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
ooh and they ah, and they pat you on the back, and they say, "Wow, man, that's a great custom Batman or Spider-Man," or "I love that version of the Green Lantern," or whatever. But when you have five characters that nobody in the world knows who they are other than you're
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
faced with a quandary. How do I post pictures of these action figures that I know in my heart are perfect?
Uh-huh.
I've never made more perfect action figures. They were in my mind, and boom, here they are.
Yeah.
Well, I had to come up with obviously names.
Hmm.
I had to come up with some kind of backstory, right? Some origin story for these guys. And the next thing I found myself doing was not only coming up with origin stories for these characters, but all of a sudden the story started to flow where they were all together committing the art heist of the century.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the next thing you know, one thing leads to another. And I came up with the Masters.
Beautiful book. I love it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. As I mentioned, all of the fandom, the classic vibes kind of come through, and curious about what draws you to comics as the space where you want to tell the stories that you want to tell.
Well, I think that I've always had a problem with reading books without pictures. So, and I think a lot of comic book fans feel the same way as I do. I think we're all cut from the same cloth. And, we comic book fans, and I know I can only speak for myself, but I think I can get away with this. We are stimulated visually, Jason.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the big thing. And not only do we want to read the words, we want to see what we're reading or interpret what's going on through the words and the images. I mean, the best comic books are the ones that have the fewest words,
Hmm.
and they let the artist tell the story. We've seen that thousands of times, literally, in the business. So, as somebody who is visually stimulated, but also, cerebrally stimulated, the words and the art go hand in hand. And on
Hmm.
top of it, if you can find a comic that has a really, really top-notch letterer who takes their role in the comic book as art as well,
Hmm. Hmm.
you have the whole package. You have the penciler, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, the storyteller. I know we're talking about the Masters right now, but I'm also working on this series called Super Joe Unlimited.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I value our team so much on this series that we made the decision we're putting everybody's name on the cover.
Love it.
So the writers are on the cover, the artist is on the cover, the colorist is on the cover, the letterer's name is on the cover. We're all there because it's kind of like what's that old saying? The sum of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And you think that for so many, I've always thought of that applies to so many rock and roll bands
Hmm.
or bands in general. I was always been a big Led Zeppelin fan, but individually, those guys are great. But together, they might be the greatest band of all time.
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at things. And the only reason I didn't put everybody's name on the covers of the Masters except for mine is because there's like 16 to 20 different artists in every book.
Right.
So it's kind of difficult to throw it. It's going to take up the whole cover.
Hmm.
But we go into detail in every book. We make sure everybody gets their the credit that is due them, from the bios to being listed as what their contribution is in that individual issue. But getting back to your original question, man, it's the sum of the parts. It's the whole
Hmm.
that makes comic books so amazing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I love that moment where, as a young reader, you recognize, oh, there are people that made this. There are all of these people that collaborate that bring their ideas together. And you mentioned like the role of the letterer or the colorist, or whatever those happen to be. Some of those names that don't often make it to the cover. It's kind of a game changer when you start to key into those individuals and their styles and the way that they connect with you.
100%. And as an adult and now as a publisher of a comic book company, I look and people come to me with ideas,
Hmm.
whether it's horror or religious comic books or adult humor or
Hmm.
anything in between, traditional hero villain like I've typically done so far. And I can look at a script, I can listen to an idea from somebody, and I can immediately say, this guy would be perfect for this.
Hmm.
When we were working on Super Joe Unlimited, we brought in Jim Brown, who has done a ton of G.I. Joe or Real American Hero books for IDW,
Hmm. Hmm.
because, Super Joe is essentially an action figure line from the late 70s
Yeah.
that kind of like is the black sheep of the Joe family. And I wanted to keep the style for the most part and the writing storyline for the most part, that Bronze Age feel.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I really wanted to bring what his colors have brought to a Real American Hero to it. And I think it's the absolute perfect combination.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
with the Masters, almost all of the coloring and lettering is done by Mort Todd. Now,
Hmm.
Mort Todd at one time was the youngest editor of Cracked magazine, if you remember.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
his coloring style and his lettering style and his personality, if you know him,
Yes. Yeah.
lends perfectly to the Masters series. If I couldn't imagine Jim doing the Masters the way I have it in my mind, and I can't imagine Mort doing the Super Joe the way I have it in my mind, if you know what I'm saying.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that just doesn't go with colorists, but it goes with pencilers and inkers and different combinations of those guys of the teams together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's when people come to me, like I'm working on an idea right now that I can't really divulge. I'm pitching a guy who just came out with a movie, and I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, listen, would you like to turn this movie into a graphic novel?" And he's like, "Wow, I never thought of that. That sounds great." And as I'm watching this movie, I can visualize how I would put it down on paper and who I would want doing the art, because there's a lot of flashbacks in this story.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
have, like, let's say you basically have two people talking to each other, and that's all you see pretty much throughout the movie. But every conversation, every start of a new dialogue they have between each other is a flashback to years ago,
Hmm.
thousands of years ago, yesterday. And the way I want to portray those flashbacks, is perfect for this artist. But the main story, the main interaction of the two, when it's, like time is now,
Hmm.
it's this artist. So I've reached out to a couple of different artists and say, hey, you think you'd like to team up with me on this? I want you to do this, and I want you to do this. And I think we're going to make a pretty solid pitch to them, as that this is going to be a really cool contrast in styles, but it's needed to convey the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love the creative vision that you bring, and you're obviously very thoughtful about it. And obviously, I've mentioned fandom several times because just to say, I want it to have that Bronze Age feel. Like, I appreciate that as a reader to be in the hands of a writer and a creator who has that vision for the way they want to bring that visual world together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I know that you're currently running a campaign. Is this true? That's
Yes,
going on
it
for the
is.
next week, I believe.
Right. It ends midnight next Friday night, or this coming Friday night, October 27th,
Hmm.
depending on
Hmm.
depending on when we broadcast, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, but it is the fourth installment of the Masters. So we just shipped out in the last few weeks issues 2 and issues 3 of the Masters. So
Hmm.
issue 4 is now in the Kickstarter campaign phase. We're about 3 weeks in, maybe a little more than 3 weeks in, and we're just about at $6,000. With help from your listeners and viewers, and people who haven't backed the project yet, that have backed our other project. We think we have a really good shot at getting over $12,000, maybe 13 grand on this one.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's the story again. It's the art heist of the century. You've got these crazy uh, art inspired villains, and I kind of did it in a tongue in cheek Adam West Batman style of fun.
Love
You
it. Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
is there a serious tone to it? Yeah, there's a serious tone into it. Anytime you have good versus evil, right? But at the end of the day, these characters I envisioned could be on Adam West Batman show as these flamboyant villains who have, they have a magic camera, they have magic paint, and they're all flamboyant and colorful and just a
Hmm.
lot of
Hmm.
fun. And they can say funny things and snide comments, and they come off as being witty and laughable, but also, dangerous as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I love the Batman 66 kind of era and vibe, and
Right.
I just appreciate it. And in a lot of ways, I'm just thinking about your background here and how you're kind of representing these characters. In a lot of ways, I see your work as doing something new and also a love letter to um, some of the kind of traditions of storytelling at the same time. So there's a
Yeah.
really nice balance there.
Yeah.
So a couple of things before we wrap up, one of which is curious if you want to give a hat tip to the person that created the background for you.
Oh, yeah. This is what I call the Daryl Young wall in
Yes.
my home. So Daryl Young is a contributor to Power Comics. He has made, if we turn this way and we take a look, these are all of the characters from the Masters, the 6 villains, which includes the leader of the Masters right here, but we left a question mark in his face. So
Hmm.
we wouldn't give that away. And then the heroes down at the bottom, as you can see. And then the other side of the wall is filled up with some DC heroes and Marvel heroes. I call that my comic book counterparts wall. And as you can see, I'll have the Flash and Quicksilver.
Hmm.
I'll have Aquaman and Submariner, Doctor Strange and Doctor Fate, and so on and so forth. But
Hmm.
Daryl Young, all of these prints have been available on all of our Kickstarters. You can find Daryl Young on Etsy, on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook. Again, he's a personal friend of mine, and I wouldn't have wanted to do this project without him.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks for letting me give him a plug.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of Power Comics, the Kickstarter web spaces that are particularly go-to spots, social media outlets, where can folks kind of find out more?
Yeah, the best thing to do, honestly, is just to search Power Comics Inc.
Hmm.
INC, Power Comics Inc. On Facebook, I have a Facebook page for Power Comics Inc. We have a Facebook group called Power Comics ! That's where all the fans get to chat and contribute and whatnot.
Hmm.
I'm also on Instagram, on Twitter. I just started a TikTok page.
Nice,
And
nice.
yeah, I think TikTok, there's so, man, there's so much growth that we could do with TikTok.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're not touching that yet. I'm in the process of creating an Etsy store. I was doing some research on Etsy. I don't see a lot of comic book related spaces on Etsy. So I'm
Hmm.
thinking, boy, if I show up with comic books and my characters on t-shirts and cups and hats and whatever, right? Posters, I think it might be a nice avenue to bring in some more revenue.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
love that.
yeah, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. The enterprising person that you are. I like it. That leads to the final official question that I have, which was actually question two in our list, but I'm just sort of revisiting it here. So if I am a listener who's thinking, man, I have these ideas for action figures and stories, and maybe I'm 12 or 112. Maybe 112 is unlikely, but maybe I'm younger, maybe I'm older. Any advice from a professional who's done this and has been doing this and has had wonderful material put out in the world?
My advice, it's kind of like the Nike slogan, just do it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, the way I got things started, Jason, was, I had this idea. I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a professional cartoonist, worked for DC Comics, Art Baltazar.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Art Baltazar, he and I have been friends for a good 15 to 20 years. And I met him before he became famous. And we were both customizing action figures. So we had a similar hobby.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
became fast friends. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, man, I've got this idea for a comic book." And he encouraged me. He liked the story so much. He loved the figures, loved the stories. He wanted to introduce me to Dan DiDio, the former publisher of DC.
Hmm. Hmm.
Unfortunately, a couple weeks before we were supposed to meet in Chicago at C2E2, Dan lost his job. And I had put so much into this, I didn't want to just put it in a drawer and forget about it, especially when a pro is telling you, "Hey, man, this is good stuff."
Right, right.
So I just started researching. I started calling people. I started reaching out to other people that I knew in the business. I started picking Art's brain. Who else can I reach out to? Who else can I call?
Hmm.
And everybody that I reached out to, whether it was on Facebook Messenger, email, Twitter, phone call, whatever it was, I'd always ask them, "Okay, well, who else can I talk to?" And everybody would, at the very least, would give me one name, if not two. So all of a
Awesome.
sudden now I'm reaching out to two people and they're giving me two people. It's like that old Fabergé organic shampoo ad. They told two friends and so on and so on. So next thing I knew, I was at a point where, okay, I know a couple of guys in the business. I'm going to reach out to them. This is besides Art Baltazar. Because, through Art over the last few years, I met a bunch of my heroes at these comic book conventions. Because
Hmm.
he and I, we would go together. If he wasn't setting up a table or a booth, we would get in the car and we would drive to Milwaukee from Chicago. We would go wherever the wind took us, Columbus, Ohio, wherever we were. So I had the pleasure of meeting Alex Saviuk, famous
Hmm.
Spider-Man artist, and Joe Rubenstein, who probably has been involved in making more individual unique characters than anybody. This guy has inked everybody from 1972 to 2023. I mean, he's just been immersed in this,
Hmm.
and we have
Hmm.
become friendly. So I reached out to him in a quick email and said, "Hey, this is what I'm looking at doing. I've got a story about this. I'd like some of your friends to do some covers for me, and I'd like you to ink them. Do you think you could put me in touch with," you ready for this list? "Alan Weiss,
Hmm. Hmm.
Ron Wilson, and Kerry Gamble."
Yeah, yeah.
I get a message back from him. I tell you, hand to God, it had to be 5 minutes later. This sounds like a lot of fun. Send me what you want me to say to these guys, and I'll send it to them and see what they say. Next thing you know, here I am with comic books that have Pat Broderick, Alex Saviuk, Joe Rubenstein, Alan Weiss, Mike Gustovich,
Hmm.
Mike Grell, Ramona Fraden did a cover for me. Ron Wilson, the king of covers of the 70s, right?
Yeah,
And on
yeah.
and on and on. Here's Al Saviuk, right? I even got Art Baltazar to put an ad in my book, right?
Wow.
So you name it, they're in. And Val Merrick, as I'm flipping through this, it's amazing. Andrew Peepoy, of course, Mort Todd, as I mentioned before.
Hmm.
I'm looking at, Arvell Jones couldn't do any art for me, but he helped recreate a character with me. Al Milgram, I think one of the most underappreciated artists of his time. Tom Morgan, who's done amazing stuff. Mike Vosberg, who was legendary when it came to G.I. Joe, covers for me. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, the bottom line is if you want to get it done.
Love it.
Keep fighting for it, man.
Hmm.
I mean, look, I have physical comic books in my hand that I wrote, that I was
Yeah.
able to put together. Um, it takes a lot of work and a lot of sacrifices, but at the end of the day, it's worth it. And one of the things that I wanted to do, it's funny because remember all the old Marvel comic books, they always had this code number in the corner, right? Like
Hmm.
X-Men had a certain code number and Avengers had a certain code number. Well, I don't know if you could see that, but my code number is 292918. Those are the birth dates of my three sons.
I love it. Love it.
So when I am dead and gone, they can show my grandchildren, their children, and their grandchildren, hey, you know what? This is your grandfather blowing me a kiss.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Just
Awesome.
keep
Awesome.
fighting, man. Keep doing it. And where one door shuts, another one opens, man.
Hmm. Absolutely. I love that. I hope folks out there will check out the work if they haven't already. And if they have already, I hope they'll check out the continuing story. And Austin, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for spending some time with me. And thanks for celebrating the world of fandom and just making some really cool books to put out there.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate you reaching out to me. And one quick last thing, you will be able to find The Masters if you just search The Masters
Hmm.
at Kickstarter, and you'll be able to search or find Super Joe Unlimited at Indiegogo. We started it on Kickstarter. It finished. We raised over 13 grand. We moved it over to Indiegogo to keep the campaign going. And just to show you something really cool, I don't know if you're familiar with Super Joe at all, but I had these amazing helmets made,
Oh, cool. Very cool. Nice.
and they are available at the Indiegogo page. I had one made for Super Joe Commander and then one for Darkon.
Nice.
Not too shabby, right?
Not too shabby at all.
And they're available over there for sale. So, if somebody has deep pockets, they're there for the taking.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, very creative, highly creative. And again, thank you so much. Glad to talk with you somewhere down the line as the story continues to unfold.
My pleasure. I appreciate you.